তুমি কি কেবলই ছবি, শুধু পটে লেখা, ওই যে সুদূর নিহারিকা, যারা করে আছে ভিড় আকাশের নীড়, ওই যারা দিন রাত্রি আলো হাতে চলিয়াছে আধারের যাত্রী, গ্রহ তারা রবে। তুমি কি তাদের মতো সত্য নও? হায় ছবি, তুমি শুধু ছবি, তুমি কি কেবলই ছবি। নয়ন সম্মুখে তুমি নাই, নয়নের মাঝখানে নিয়েছো যে ঠাই, আজি তাই শ্যামলে শ্যামল তুমি, নীলিমায় নীল আমার নিখিল, তোমাতে পেয়েছে তার অন্তরের মিল। নাহি জানি কেহ নাহি জানে, তব সুর বাজে মোর গানে, কবির অন্তরে তুমি কবি। ন ছবি ন ছবি ন শুধু ছবি, তুমি কি কেবলই ছবি।
April 1884, 125 years ago. At that time, Jodasago, the ancient home of the Tagores, was enveloped by a thick shadow of death, which was to cast its rule for a long time to come. A 25-year-old daughter-in-law of the family had ended her life for reasons not clearly established even today. For the past 16 years, she had been a playmate, a mother figure, and a muse to Rabindranath Tagore, the most famous of all the illustrious Tagores. Her name was Kadambari Devi. She was Natun Bauthakur or Bauthakurun to Rabindranath. Coming from a humble social background, 9-year-old Kadambari Devi entered the house of Tagores, which was blessed with wealth and wisdom, and was a beehive of cultural activities, where enlightened minds exchange, entertain, and embrace fresh ideas in all spheres of life. Grandfather of Rabindranath was known as Prince Dwarkanath. He was an ambitious, anglicized entrepreneur and an enlightened soul. While his success in business might have been a source of envy to his contemporaries, his philanthropic gestures were indeed exemplary. He was a friend of Ram Mohan Roy, the great progressive intellectual of his time. Prince Dwarkanath Tagore died a premature death at the age of 52 in England, and left behind a legacy of debt for his son, known as Maharshi Rabindranath. Maharshi was an astute administrator, as well as a worldly ascetic steeped in spiritual pursuits. He was a disciple of Ram Mohan Roy and the flag bearer of the Brahmo movement. He lived in Jodasankar along with his brothers and their families. It was indeed a large family living under one roof. Rabindranath was 14th of 15 children of Maharshi Rabindranath and Sharda Devi. Apart from Rabindranath, there were at least 3 brothers and a sister who were brilliant in their own right. The eldest brother, Vijayendra, was 21 years older than Rabindranath and had written Swapnaprayan in 1875. It was acknowledged as a trendsetter in Bengali. He was a philosopher and was held in high esteem even by Gandhiji. The second brother, Satyendranath, was 19 years older than Rabindranath. He was the first Indian to join Indian civil service. He was a philosopher, prolific writer, poet, and composer of songs. Along with his wife, Gnanadanandini Devi, he is credited with encouraging education among women, as well as elevating their social status. The fifth brother, Jyotirindranath, 12 years older than Rabindranath, was an accomplished painter, musician, poet, and a theatre personality. He knew Sanskrit, Marathi, and French, apart from Bengali and English. He was the mentor of Rabindranath. The fifth sister, Swarna Kumari Devi, 3 years older than Rabindranath, was a writer, musician, and a social worker. She was the first woman to have written a novel in Bengali. In spite of 5 children endowed with proficient pen, none of their works have been dedicated to their mother, nor has she figured prominently in the literature. It is quite likely that the mother who had delivered 15 children in the course of 25 years, who had to look after a large household and attend to a variety of social obligations in the frequent and extended absence of a radical husband, could not spare enough time for a large pool of children. A glimpse of his mother's casual attitude.
When it grew dark, bowed down by terror of ghosts, I would head for my mother's room. Ma would then be playing cards with her paternal aunt. The room with its patterned parquet floor gleamed like ivory. The enormous bedspread was covered with an embroidered quilted spread. I would make such a nuisance of myself that she would fling down her hand of cards and exclaim, "What a troublesome boy! Auntie, please go them and tell them a story." Having washed our feet in the outer veranda, he would climb into bed, dragging our grace with us.
It is interesting to note what Rabindranath Tagore, a nephew of Rabindranath and a renowned painter who grew up in the same premises as did Rabindranath, says about Sharda Devi.
Korta Didi Ma was pretty. All her sons were handsome and fair. Only Robi Kaka was dark. She used to rub him with wheat flour and cream. She used to say that of all my sons, only Robi is dark.
That was an era of change at Jodasankar. Change that was slowly being introduced by Satyendranath, who was educated in England. In 1868, Jyotirindranath was 19 years old and his marriage was arranged with 9-year-old Kadambari Devi. Satyendranath was not very happy with this proposition, as he wanted Jyotirindranath to study further in England. Kadambari Devi was still a child and he did not think very highly of a family. However, Maharshi felt that it was fortunate that he could find a girl for Jyotirindra, as they were Pirali Brahmins and Brahmos at that. The family of Kadambari Devi was known to the Tagore family and was fond of literature and music. Kadambari Devi was practically illiterate when she got married. Under such circumstances, Rabindranath first came across Kadambari Devi. At that time, he was 7 years old. Giving a poetic description of his first encounter with Kadambari Devi, Rabindranath says,
Days passed by in this monotonous fashion, like the breed of grasshopper that blends its hues with the color of dry leaves. My heart would wear a faded tint to merge with the dryness of those days. And so my days, all of exactly the same measure, confined me in a circular maze of dry fence posts. Then one day, the notes of the Shehnai rang out in Barao tones. Into the house came a new bride, thin gold bangles on a tender dark wrist. In a blink of an eye, a gap opened up in the dry fence to reveal a newcomer from magic lands beyond the boundaries of our familiar world.
3 times a day for some days, the wedding music played, changing the daily language around us, and in all the rooms the lights made a fuss in lanterns and chandeliers. The marvelous opened in the midst of all the too familiar. Decked in colors, feet dyed in alta, someone came, hinting she wasn't a person of limited value, belonging to this world, but was unique, past compared. For the first time to the boy's eyes was revealed something that could be seen but couldn't be known. The flutes stopped playing, but not what they implied. Our bride remained girded by marvel's invisible rays. Her treaties, quarrels, sports were all with her groom sister. Conquering shyness, I would try to get a little close, my mind in a whirl because of her sari stripes. But her frowns would soon let me know I was just a kid.
His initial curiosity about this new member of the family was all the more aroused due to the strictly observed fence between the inner quarters occupied by women and the outer quarters of men. In boyhood days, Rabindranath says,
The house was then divided into 2 separate quarters known as mahals. The men occupied the outer portion while the women remained in the inner chambers. The style of the Nawabs was still in vogue. I remember Didi, my elder sister, strolling on the terrace with the new bride, exchanging intimacies. When I tried to get close, she sent me packing with a rebuke. This area was out of bounds for boys. I must return crestfallen to the shadow of those dingy old days of routine existence. When from far off hills the rain floods descend, they swiftly undermine the foundations of ancient dams. So it was with us now. The lady of the house declared the advent of a new dispensation. Bauthakurun was allotted the room adjoining the private terrace. The terrace became her domain. Wedding feasts for dolls were held there with leaf platters and all. And this youngster, yours truly, would be the guest of honor at such celebrations. Bauthakurun was a good cook and an excellent hostess. And she found me a willing guest to satisfy her taste for entertaining. As soon as I returned home from school, I would be offered food she had herself prepared, sanctified by her touch. And on days when she mashed mixed vegetables prepared with shrimp into the fermented rice with a light of flavoring of chili, there was no containing my delight. Sometimes when she was away visiting relatives, I would be enraged to find her sandals missing from the place outside her door, and I would hide some precious item from her room to force a quarrel. Hiding her keys in a flower pot like a prankster from hell, I would try her temper and test her love for me as well. Who is supposed to mind your room when you are away? Am I your chowkidar, your minder?
You need not mind my room. Just mind your thieving hands.
At the age of 12, soon after his thread ceremony, Rabindranath was taken along by his father on his extended sojourn in the Himalayas. On his return, he was delighted to find a change in his status at being accepted in the inner quarters. He explained his joy.
On my return, I gained an accession of my rights. In my case, my very nearness had so long kept me out of mind. Now that I had been out of sight, I came back in view. When I arrived, it was not merely a homecoming for travel. It was also a return from my exile in servants' quarters to my proper place in the inner apartments. Whenever the inner household assembled in my mother's room, I now occupied a seat of honor, and she, who was the youngest bride of our house, lavished on me a wealth of affection and regard. In infancy, the loving care of woman is to be had without asking, and being as much a necessity as light and air, is as simply accepted without any conscious response. The growing child often displays an eagerness to free itself from the encircling web of woman's solicitude. But the unfortunate creature who is deprived of this in its proper season is beggared indeed. This had been my plight. So after being brought up in servants' quarters, when I suddenly came in for a profusion of womanly affection, I could hardly remain unconscious of it.
Soon after, Maharshi moved out of Jodasaku, and his room next to the terrace was taken over by Jyotirindranath. Rabindranath says in boyhood days,
Bauthakrun had transformed the terrace into a regular garden with rows of tall palms on the balustrades, surrounded by flowering plants, chameli, gandharaj, Rajani-gandha, Korobi, Dolan Chapa. It did not occur to her that this might damage the terrace. We were all whimsical lot, all of us.
And about Jyotirindranath, he says,
My fifth brother Jyotirindra was one of my chief helpers in my literary and emotional training. He was an enthusiast himself and loved to evoke enthusiasm in others. He did not allow the difference between our ages to be any bar to my free intellectual and sentimental intercourse with him. This great boon of freedom, which he allowed me, none else would have dared to give. Many even blamed him for it. His companionship made it possible for me to shake off my shrinking sensitiveness. It was as necessary for my soul after its rigorous repression during my infancy as are the monsoon clouds after a fiery summer.
In Rabindranath's own words, an excerpt of the unforgettable pleasant times the three of them had on the terrace.
At the end of the day, mats and bolsters would be arranged on the terrace. On a silver dish, jasmine garlands wrapped in damp handkerchiefs would be placed. There would be a tumbler of iced water on a saucer, and in a bowl, fragrant pan. Freshly bathed and dressed, her hair coiffed, Bauthakurun would take her place. Jyotidada would appear, a light wrap cast airily across his shoulders. He would put his bow to the violin, and I would launch into song on a high note. The Creator has never taken away the slight talent for music He had granted me. My song would be carried across the rooftops and into the sky. From the far off sea, the southern breeze would blow, and the sky would fill with stars.
About this time, Tagore family launched a periodical named Bharati. Sharat Kumari, wife of Akshay Chaudhary, the poet, says,
Bharati was really a brainchild of Jyoti Babu. On the second floor terrace of Jyoti Babu, a garden was created with potted plants, and Akshay Babu used to call it Nandan Kanan. In the evening, all the members of the family would gather there regularly. Everyone sees the flowers making up the garland, but the existence of the thread keeping the flowers together is noticed by none. The wife of Rabindranath Tagore was that thread.
about the gathering and feast at Jodasako at that time, Rabindranath says,
In the evening was the feast at Jyotikaka Moshai. The ambience was this feast was different. Tarak Polit, Akshay Babu, poet Bihari Lal would grace this feast. Though young, Rabi Kaka would also participate. Here women were allowed. Wife of Jyoti Kaka was the mistress here. Here was song, music and recitation of poetry, one after another.
in late 1930s, relaxing at Mangapu, a small town in the Himalayas, Rabindranath confided in Maitreyi Devi,
Oh, that food cooked by Bautan on the second floor roof. It tasted like nectar. She always poked fun at me. That was her only way of showing affection. I felt so shy and sorry. I used to wonder how I could become such that she would not be able to find any fault with me. When all of us were taking food together, she would suddenly say,
Look, watch Ravi eating. He eats exactly like him.
him meaning her husband Jyotirendranath. I used to feel ashamed, but actually it was a compliment to eat like him. A very flattering compliment indeed. She would say,
Robbie is darker than any of us, not at all good looking. His voice is peculiar. He will never be able to sing. Satya sings far better than him.
she would never admit that I could write or that I would ever be able to. Bihari Lal was her ideal. She would recognize only one good quality in me, that I could cut betel nut well. She would say,
Robbie cuts betel nuts so beautifully.
but that was only a trick to get the work done. When I came back from school and found her not at home, I felt so disheartened. She used to say banteringly,
Well, am I to give up all my social duties for you?
I used to pester her a lot with my childish whims.
at other times he would say,
Did you ever ride on an Arab horse? Natun Bautan used to ride, accompanied by my brother, along the Chitpur road on those horses. Can you ever imagine how daring the thing that was in those days? Not only were they big animals, a much bigger affair was the fact that a housewife, a woman, was out for a ride. But she did not care a rap. Yes, she certainly had unique qualities. Indeed, Natun Bautan was unique.
It was their love for literature that drew them together. In the words of Rabindranath,
My sister-in-law was a great lover of literature. She did not read simply to kill time, but the Bengali books which she read filled her whole mind. I was a partner in her literary enterprises. She was a devoted admirer of Swapna Prayan, written by my eldest brother. So was I. The more particularly as, having been brought up in the atmosphere of its creation, its beauties had become intertwined with every fiber of my heart.
Rabindranath lost his mother when he was 14 years old. It was 16 years.
Might have even succeeded in working myself up to the belief that I was actually writing like him. But for my sister-in-law, she was a zealous devotee who stood in the way. She would keep reminding me of a Sanskrit saying, "The unworthy aspirant after poetic fame departs in jeers." Very possibly she knew that if my vanity was once allowed to get the upper hand, it would be difficult afterwards to bring it under control. So neither my poetic abilities nor my powers of song readily received any praise from her. Rather, would she never let slip an opportunity of praising somebody else's singing at my expense, with the result that I gradually became quite convinced of the defects of my voice. Misgivings about my poetic powers also assailed me. But as this was the only field of activity left in which I had any chance of retaining my self-respect, I could not allow the judgment of another to deprive me of all hope. Moreover, so insistent was the spur within me that to stop my poetic adventure was a matter of sheer impossibility.
In mid-1878, when Rabindranath was 17 years old, he left Kolkata to accompany his brother Satyendranath to Ahmedabad, Mumbai, and then to England to study law. During this period, Swarna Kumari Devi, Rabindranath's sister, moved to Jodasako with her children, as her husband had also gone to England in end 1878 to study law. 19-year-old Kadambari Devi was still without a child, although she had been married for 10 years. It was Urmila, 5-year-old daughter of Swarna Kumari, on whom she lavished all her attention and love. Unfortunately, Urmila died an accidental death in end 1879. Once again, Kadambari Devi was all by herself to pursue her literary interests. Rabindranath was called back from England by his father for reasons conjectured about but not definitely known. And they returned to Kolkata in March 1880. Rabindranath was now 19 years old and Kadambari Devi 21. In no time, he was engulfed in the artistic activities pursued at Jodasako under the tutelage of Jyotirindranath. Soon the three of them moved away from Jodasako to a house on the banks of Ganga. This was perhaps the most fulfilling period. The pleasant memories of those days in his autobiography.
The Ganges again those ineffable days and nights, languid with joy, sad with longing, attuned to the plaintive babbling of the river, along the cool shade of its wooded banks, this Bengal sky full of light, this south breeze, this flow of the river, this right royal laziness, this broad leisure stretching from horizon to horizon, and from green earth to blue sky. All this were to me as food and drink to the hungry and thirsty. Here it felt indeed like home. And in these I recognized the ministrations of a mother. Those lovely days of mine at the riverside passed by like so many dedicated lotus blossoms floating down the sacred stream. Some rainy afternoons I spent in a veritable frenzy, singing away old Vaishnava songs to my own tunes, accompanying myself on a harmonium. On other afternoons, we would drift along into a boat, my brother Jyotirendra accompanying my singing with his violin. And as beginning with the Purabi, we went on varying the mode of our music with the declining day, we saw on reaching the Bihag, the western sky close the doors of its factory of golden toys, and the moon on the east rise over the fringe of trees. Then we would row back to the landing steps of the villa and seat ourselves on a quilt spread on the terrace facing the river. By then, a silvery peace rested on both land and water. Hardly any boats were about. The fringe of trees on the bank was reduced to a deep shadow, and the moonlight glimmered over the smooth flowing stream.
The villa we were living in was known as Moran's Garden. A flight of stone-flagged steps led up from the water to a long, broad veranda which formed part of the house. The rooms were not regularly arranged, nor all on the same level, and some had to be reached by short flights of stairs. The big sitting room overlooking the landing steps had stained glass windows with colored pictures. One of the pictures was of a swing hanging from a branch half hidden in dense foliage, and in the checkered light and shade of this bower, two persons were swinging. And there was another of a broad flight of steps leading into some castle-like palace, up and down which men and women in festive garb were going and coming. When the light fell on the windows, these pictures shone wonderfully, seeming to fill the riverside atmosphere with holiday music. Some faraway, long forgotten revelry seemed to be expressing itself in silent words of light. The love thrills of the swinging couple making alive with their eternal story the woodlands of the riverbank. The topmost room of the house was in a round tower with windows opening to every side. This I used as my room for writing poetry. Nothing could be seen from thence, save the tops of the surrounding trees and the open sky. I was then busy with Shaishav Sangeet, and of this room I wrote,
There, where in the breast of limitless space, clouds are laid to sleep, I have built my house for thee, O poesy.
Once again, in 1935, Rabindranath had spent a few months in his boat Padma, moored at Chandannagar. Reminiscing his earlier sojourn, he would tell Rani Chanda,
Jyoti Dada, Notun Bautan, and I used to come and stay in that house. At that time, I used to swim across Ganga. Seeing that, Notun Bautan used to be terrified. Notun Bautan and I used to stroll through woods and eat so many berries. I had composed music for so many of Vidyapati's songs at that time. E Phara Badar, Mah Bhadar, Shunya Mandira More was composed at that time only. Composing, I would sing to Notun Bautan. I used to love her a lot. She also loved me a lot. It was with that love for Notun Bautan that my soul is in tune with the women of Bengal. And listen, one who dies goes away forever. You cannot see them. By calling, their soul does not appear. What intense pain I suffered when Notun Bautan passed away. I remember all night I used to roam around the terrace and staring at the sky I would say, "Where are you, Notun Bautan? Come and look me up at once, at least at once." Those who die do not grow old. My Notun Bautan has remained the young woman she was, and I have become an old man, bent with age.
In a soliloquy addressed to Kadambari Devi, Rabindranath says,
Along with these expressions, I am giving you something else that you alone will be able to grasp. Do you recollect that bank of Ganga? That stunned and silent night? That moonlight? Those two persons roaming through the realm of imagination? That intense discourse in soft and serious tone? Those two persons sitting together without a word? That morning breeze, that shadow of the evening, those dense and rolling clouds, that rain of July, songs of Vidyapati? All that is now past. But these expressions record that history. Within these writings, I have hidden a few joys and sorrows of some of those days. With your loving gaze, each one of those days will appear distinctly. But for you, no one else will be able to find them. I have written all that within these writings. You and I will read one meaning, and all the others will read something else.
Later in 1880, the poet, along with Jyotirindranath and Kadambari Devi, visited his brother Satyendranath, who was posted at Karwar. The first draft of the song, Tomare Koriachi Jibonera Dhruvatara, appears to have been made at that time. When Bhagna Hridaya was appearing serially in Bharati, this song was used for dedication. Translated, it means,
Having you as the pole star of my life, never again will I be lost in this ocean.
However, when Bhagna Hridaya was published as a book in 1881, it was dedicated to Srimati Hay. Hay is supposed to be an abbreviation of Hecate, a witch appearing in Shakespeare's Macbeth, which the two of them had read together. It is accepted that this publication was dedicated to Kadambari Devi. By now, her companion Rabindranath was an acclaimed poet and saw more of her elder sister-in-law, Gnanadanandini Devi, wife of Satyendranath Tagore. Her own husband, Jyotirindranath, was involved with his latest venture of shipbuilding. Under such circumstances, leading to loneliness, 4 months after Rabindranath got married to Mrinalini Devi in April 1884, for reasons as yet not clearly established, Kadambari Devi committed suicide. Soon after her demise, Prakrutir, Pratishodh, Shaishtava Sangeet and Banu Sheher Padavali were published, and Rabindranath dedicated all the 3 works to the memory of Kadambari Devi without explicitly naming her. Each of these dedications indicate the nature of the relationship, how literature had brought them together, how Rabindranath was encouraged and inspired by her personality, and how intensely he missed her presence. Dedication of Prakriti Pratisho reads simply,
Given to you.
Shaishav Sangeet has somewhat longer dedication.
Series of these poems are given to you. For a long time, I used to sit next to you and write. I used to recite to you only. Memories of all that love presides over these. Hence, I feel, whether you are here or not, these writings will catch your eyes.
Dedication to Bhanu Sheher Padavali reads,
Many a times you requested me to publish the poems of Bhanushinga. I did not heed to your request then. Today, I have published these, but you would not be able to see them.
Death of Kadambari Devi left a void in the life of Rabindranath that was to inspire many memorable poems all through his life. 17 years after her death, Rabindranath described this complex relationship in his memorable novella Nostoni, which was subsequently made into an exquisite film, Charulata, directed by Satyajit Ray. When Rabindranath started painting after the age of 60, the eyes of Kadambari Devi, perpetually haunting him, have reappeared in many of his portraits of women. In 1914, 30 years after the demise of Kadambari Devi, Rabindranath came across a photograph of her in Allahabad, which inspired him to write one of his famous poems and perhaps his greatest tribute to her, an excerpt from his immortal poem, Chobi.
Are you only an image, only on canvas painted? Those far-off nebulae that crowd into their nest in the sky, those pilgrims unto the dark, journeying day and night with torches of light, are you not as real as they are? An image only are you? Did I forget you? You have taken abode at the root of my life, and so I forget. Unmindful I go along the road. Did I not forget the flowers? Do I not forget the stars? Yet they sweeten the breath of my life, and fill with music the forgetful void. Not to remember is not to forget. For from the heart of oblivion you have sent a quiver through my blood. You are not before my eyes, it is within their depth that you live. And so today, you are the green of the green earth and the blue of the blue sky, and in you my world has found its heart's desire. I do not know, and nobody knows. It is your music that I sing in my songs, and it is you who is the poet in the poet's mind. Not a likeness, not a painting, not a mere image are you.
তুমি কি কেবলে ছবি শুধু পটে লেখা ওই যে সুদূর নিহারিকা যারা করে আছে ভিড় আকাশের নীড় ওই যারা দিন রাত্রি আলো হাতে চলিয়াছে আধারের যাত্রী গ্রহ তারা রবি তুমি কি তাদের মতো সত্য না হায় ছবি তুমি শুধু ছবি বলি ছবি নয়ন সম্মুখে তুমি নাই নয়নের মাঝখানে এছো যে ঠাই আজি তাই শ্যামলে শ্যামল তুমি নীলিমায় নীল আমার নিখিল তোমাতে পেয়েছে তার অন্তরের মেঘ নাহি জানে কেহ নাহি জানে তব সুর বাজে মোর গানে কবির অন্তরে তুমি কবি নও ছবি নও ছবি নও শুধু ছবি তুমি কি কেবলি ছবি
Many years later, explaining the poem to a young girl in Mangapur, the poet had said,
What a marvel! I thought, only a few days ago, one who was so real, one who was so much to us, where is that person today? Standing aside from our life, how far away? Our life is running onward, but she has stopped over there. How little is she remembered? Yet, did I forget you? Yes, I did. What is that oblivion? Because you exist deeply in me, I don't have to remember you outwardly. Because you are at the root of my life, because you came once to my life, my world is so full of joy. My life is filled with nectar.
revealed here is the secret of the poetry, steeped in longing and yearning, but always positive, always brimming with optimism, always inspired by the Muse, who disappeared from his life in the infancy of his youth, but was the poet within forever. It was her death that inspired unique vision of death, an excerpt from his biography, autobiography.
The exchange I made with death at the age of 24 was a permanent one, and its blow has continued to add itself to each succeeding bereavement, woven into an ever-lengthening chain of tears. That there could be any gap in the unbroken procession of the joys and sorrows of life was a thing I had no idea of. I could therefore see nothing beyond, and this life I had accepted as all in all. When all of a sudden death came, and in a moment made a gaping rent in the smooth seeming fabric, I was utterly bewildered. All around, the trees, the soil, the water, the sun, the moon, the stars, they all remained as immovably true as before. And yet, the person who was as truly there, who through 1,000 points of contact with life, mind and heart, was ever so much more true for me, had vanished in a moment like a dream. What perplexing self-contradiction it all seemed to me as I looked around. How was I ever to reconcile that which remained with that which had gone? The terrible darkness which was disclosed to me through this rent continued to attract me night and day as time went on. I would ever and anon return to take my stand there and gaze upon it, pondering what there was left in place of what had gone. Emptiness is a thing man cannot bring himself to believe in. That which is not is untrue, that which is untrue is not. So all our efforts to find something where we see nothing are unceasing. Just as a young plant surrounded by darkness stretches itself, as it were on a tiptoe to find its way out into the light, so when death suddenly throws the darkness of negation round the soul, it tries and tries to rise into the light of affirmation. And what other sorrow is comparable to the state wherein darkness prevents the finding of a way out of the darkness? Yet, in the midst of this unbearable grief, flashes of joy seem to sparkle in my mind, now and again, in a way which quite surprised me. That life, not a stable, permanent fixture, was itself the sorrowful tidings which helped me to lighten my mind. That we were not prisoners forever within a solid stone wall of life was the thought which unconsciously kept coming uppermost in rushes of gladness. That which I had held, I was made to let go. This was the sense of loss which distressed me. But when at the same moment I viewed it from the standpoint of freedom gained, a great peace fell upon me. The all-pervading pressure of worldly existence compensates itself by balancing life against death, and thus it does not crush us. The terrible weight of an unopposed life force has not to be endured by men. This truth came upon me that day as a sudden, wonderful revelation. With the loosening of the attraction of the world, the beauty of nature took on for me a deeper meaning. Death had given me the correct perspective from which to perceive the world in the fullness of its beauty. And as I saw the picture of the universe against the background of death, I found it entrancing.
Coming from a humble social and academic background, Kadambari Devi went on to become her husband's companion on his rides on a horseback through the crowded streets of conservative Kolkata of the 19th century, and a muse to a poet no lesser than Rabindranath, who lamented a loss for as long as he lived. During his last days, his desire to see a picture of his Thakurun had remained unfulfilled. For Rabindranath, Kadambari Devi's life was an inspiration for his literature, and her end was an inspiration for a unique vision of death. 1 year after her death, under the title of Pushpanjali, a few prose pieces appeared in Bharati without any preface or reference. An excerpt.
The one who went away knew me for so long, for so many mornings, so many afternoons, so many evenings did she see me. How many springs, how many monsoons, how many autumns have I spent with her. She gave me so much love. She played so often with me. Through so many special events, she has observed me at close quarters. The me she knew were play of those 17 years, joys and sorrows of 17 years, spring